Hello and welcome to another episode of Creating the Curve, the podcast for STEM founders, all of those in a technical or sort of engineering industry, giving you help and advice on how to navigate the tricky sides of business. I've got a really good one for you today. We've got the magnificent Sarah Townsend on, and Sarah is all about communication. Now, having worked in STEM industries, I'm an ex-programmer. I understand how hard it can be to communicate with your audience when you're from a technical subject. So who better? Sarah, not only is she amazing at what she does, but she is a 3 times author with a book. She's got the wonderful Survival Skills for Freelancers, Confusables 1, and just released Confusables 2. So, for anyone that's listening, we're currently holding up the books. I've got the Skills for Freelancers. I've got the little, I don't know where my little book of Confusables 1 is. It's on my bookshelf somewhere, but I've got the book too. Sarah is a master of understanding how to communicate, particularly. There's one thing I love about your book, Sarah, the Confusables. It's those simple things, just making sure you're getting your language and your words right, isn't it? And just making communication that little bit easier. So, Sarah, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background?
What level of detail do you want me to go into? I always think that's such a big question. It's lovely to be here, by the way. I've been a freelance copywriter for 25 years now. I wrote the first book, Survival Skills for Freelancers, in lockdown year, but without knowing lockdown was coming. And that was super helpful with the timing because it coincided with that time where everybody was facing working from home. And there's a lot in it about staying focused and productive and motivated when you're working from home. So that was kind of convenient. That got me onto the BBC and quoted in Forbes and all these kinds of things, which was quite exciting. That book I've just re-released for 2025. So it's got all new statistics, references, resources, and links. And it's also got now 120 quotes and advice from other freelancers across all different industries and job types, I suppose. And as you say, Confusables 1 and 2, I launched Confusables 2 just before Christmas, and it's just won runner-up in the the self-published book publishing industry awards, which are called the Selfies, which are judged by industry experts. Very proud of that one. And the first Little Book of Confusables, the original, won 3 awards, including a gold medal. And I think it is because a lot of very smart people just don't find language that intuitive. And because the book is written to, the books, plural, are written to be super accessible. And they're also written to make people learn by having fun. So it makes, the Confusables books are books about spelling ultimately, but they are books that are written to entertain. The tips that they contain to help people remember those confusing words and which version of the word to use are written in a really memorable, sticky way that really work with brains. So, there we go.
It's really interesting, this sort of language of communication. Like I sort of mentioned, we got a lot of STEM founders that this podcast is designed for, and I know a lot of them, one of the reasons they don't do social posts, they don't write blogs, is because they're just worried about how they'll come across, or they sound too formal, or the language isn't right, and they're more worried about putting someone off than actually enticing them. Do you find that quite a lot with technical people, or do you find it's across most walks of life?
Yes, it is across most walks of life, but I think it's particularly prevalent in the STEM industry and industries like it. And I think that's why a lot of my clients work in industries where I guess the natural language tends to be convoluted or esoteric, and it's not necessarily a subject that is easily accessible to all. So that's why a lot of the businesses that I work with choose to work with me in kind of my day job, is as a copywriter, so putting the books aside for a moment, what I help businesses do is to communicate complicated subjects in a very
Mm.
straightforward, very human way. So it's all about accessible language. I think it's worth mentioning, by the way, that I had no voice 2 days ago. I know you know this, Anna, but just if I have to keep having a drink, that's why. Um, so yeah, it is a really big issue, and I think businesses that can appreciate, or founders that can appreciate that it's not their top skill. Writing
Mm.
is not something they particularly feel comfortable doing, and it's always worth, if you want to grow and develop as a business owner, or a company of one, or a solopreneur, whatever you want to call yourself, it's always worth outsourcing the things that you don't enjoy, you're not good at, and that aren't the area that makes you money. So potentially that's the sort of work that you might want to think about outsourcing to a copywriter. I'm not here to
Mm.
plug my services, but that's kind of the
Yeah.
reality of working in that kind of field, is that just actually playing to your strengths and saying, do you know what? I can write a draft, but actually I'll send that draft to a copywriter who will turn it into something that people can actually understand and kind of
Mm.
go, oh, okay, I get it. And I get how this can help me and support me as a business owner. And maybe I should hire this STEM company's services.
Do you know what? It's funny because the first thing I did when I had business was that I outsourced an accountant because, like, I'm sure I could do accounting if I really got into it, but I felt like it wasn't the strength, my strength. It wasn't my skill set.
Mm,
I just
mm.
don't like it. So yeah, it's an uphill struggle. But I thoroughly recommend that outsourcing. Yeah, and it's those key skill sets. I find it's the ones outsourcing the ones that you're going to get the most traction with. So, for example, communicating a business struggle. If you can't communicate with people, how can you sell stuff to them? How can you market to them?
Mm,
So, it is a huge area to look at. For me, without organizing things, I don't get anything done. So for me, that was a
mm.
that was a huge area. Do you find, from sort of small businesses, and I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room here with copywriting, which is ChatGPT.
Okay.
Do you
Oh God,
find
don't.
do you find that people are maybe relying more heavily on that at the moment sometimes? So if they think
Mm.
they can't write, that's a first turn, that they'll go to, and what are the
Yeah.
pitfalls for that?
Oh, where to start? I should have said the one subject I don't want to talk about is AI. It's just everywhere, honestly.
It
I get
is.
that it's current. It is definitely having an impact on the world of copywriting at the moment, but it tends to have had a bigger business impact on the copywriters who are perhaps churn copywriters.
Mm,
So perhaps those on the platforms such as Fiverr and Upwork, who charge very low rates for providing fast turnaround, low quality
mm,
copy, because that's realistically what it's competing with at the
yeah.
moment. It's great, if you say, look, I want to write half a dozen blogs, this is my industry, this is my audience. Can you give me suggested topics that I could write a blog about? And then if you get it to write the blog is it's usable, but what it's doing is it's piling up. It's just contributing to this absolute cesspool of mediocre, non-human
Mm,
content that is just, where do we start? When you're looking for useful information, you need to look for something where the thought has been put into it. It's not just a question of assembling the words in the right
yeah.
order. It's about the thinking and the processing behind getting to understand the business, what's important to the business, but first and foremost, how the client's mind ticks.
Mm,
What are actually the issues that keep that potential customer awake at night? What are the things that your business does for those clients
yeah.
that can actually save them time, relieve their stress, help them sleep
Mm,
better at night? ChatGPT can only go so far. And I think there'll be a massive backlash, because I think at
Mm,
some stage we'll realize that actually just putting out these mediocre, just for the sake of producing content, it's not enough. It's not doing anything to create those human connections. So maybe use
mm,
ChatGPT to generate your content ideas in the first place. Perhaps even use it for your first draft, but then get a proper copywriter involved and say, look, how do I make this stand out? How do I add that human element? And
mm.
what gives this content something that's just a cut above the mediocre? Because I read something the other day about how the generative AI had been produced, to everything that had gone into it had the aim of producing the average,
Mm.
and putting the average content out there for your business is better than doing nothing, but marginally.
Yeah, and I think that's,
So,
in the way that AI works, sort of the way it generates a paragraph. Yeah, it comes up with a word and it doesn't really understand the context of the paragraph. It goes, what's
mm,
the average idea that the next word in this paragraph will be? It is a law of averages. So, that's why you
yeah,
get certain sentences that seem to come up. Right. So the next word might be chocolate and it's trying to work
mm,
out what the next word without, the
mm,
human context. We understand language and how it's designed and how it works and how it can move people. I think that's why AI, it does lack that human feeling. The storytelling I miss from it.
mm,
It doesn't
mm,
have any stories to tell because it's not
mm,
lived our lives, and that's one of my favorite things about human storytelling. I'm a big fan of Mark Schaefer, the marketeer, and he tells lots of stories in all of his blogs. And
mm,
I had this happen, and I did this, and I did that. AI can't tell you that because it hasn't had those experiences.
mm,
And I guess that's
mm.
the difference, isn't it? Because, as a copywriter, you can draw those experiences and ideas out of people that are real
Yeah,
in life.
yeah, that's a really good and important point worth mentioning. I think the other thing, touching on what you just said about, we understand language and we understand how words go together and how to create these stories, but above all, we understand people.
Mm,
And that's something that AI can't claim.
yeah.
Yeah.
It is difficult. I'm an ex-PR copywriter, so I see it now. I've tried, Chat GPT and that, and you know, exactly what you're saying. I can see a draft come out, and then I modify it to myself, and I tweak it. And I think that that's where people are sort of coming unstuck at the moment, because I think, just like if you were to hire someone off Fiverr, etc., sometimes you'll get some content back, and if you don't have, and this is a bit back to my sort of accountant, um, if you don't have the skills to understand that content, sometimes you don't know if it's good or bad, do you? So, like
No.
my accountant sends me stuff and I have to, oh God, yeah, what does this mean? Is this right? Because you have to check everything because you're liable for it, in
Yeah.
accounts. And so I'm like, I didn't have to know a bit about accounts. And I'm just, yeah, each year I'm like, I've forgotten what this means and what that means. I have
Oh
to go and
God.
look at it.
You and me both, Anna.
And so, but the same with sort of copywriting, whatever source you get it from, particularly if it's quite cheap, it's you still have to sort of understand that sort of basic level of language. I think that's probably where your confusables books come in, because if someone
Mm,
isn't writing their own content but wants to know, if it's grammatically correct, or the right words are being used, they can use
mm.
resources like yours to understand, is this right? Does it make me sound silly, or is it good quality? So
Yeah.
it is hard, because if we don't have the skill sets to do a task, sometimes it's hard to understand the input we get back.
Yes. Agreed. And and I'm exactly with you with the accountant thing. My accountant deserves a medal for all the questions he has to deal with on an annual basis from me.
It is, and it's one of those difficult things. And would you suggest to founders that they do a sort of basic understanding of copy, just to sort of be able to articulate sort of to a
Mm,
copywriter and back, or do you think does a good quality copywriter, you
no.
can take anything and put and push it back?
Exactly that. I can
Yeah.
probably through 25 years of copywriting as a freelancer and probably 5 years before that employed, um, working agency side and client side. No, so probably the feedback. I think I've got about 150 recommendations on LinkedIn, and the one thing that comes up again and again is Sarah just got it, and I think that's what happens when you've
Mm.
done a job like I do for as long as I've done it. I don't need a complicated brief. I don't need the client to, I mean, I'm there to ask the questions. If I'm not sure about something, I know exactly what to ask to get to the root of the issue. So, no, I mean, it can't harm, can it? But let's be
Yeah.
honest, there's enough out there that you really need to learn about as a founder. I would say adding learning about copywriting into the mix is probably a step too far and not necessary.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? People. The one thing that I saw in your book, the Guide to Freelancer, the Freelancer Guide, is that oh my God, I can't even speak now. My brain's gone to mush. But in there, you talk a lot about time management, and this is
Yeah.
about an important part of that is what to keep and what to let go, and and prioritizing things, because
Mm.
a lot of founders really struggle with that. I know people that have had their business sort of 10, 12 years, and they're still working 60, 70 hours a week.
Oh, I
And by
know.
that point, you would be expected to let some things go. But there does seem to be sort of that big time management hole, I think.
Yeah. I think that is a lot of it. I think the worst thing about being self-employed can actually be like we all go self-employed to begin with because we have this kind of skill that we want to share with the world. But as I say in survival skills for freelancers, we don't necessarily appreciate just how much of the business end there is to running your own business because we focus on I'm becoming a freelancer and I'm doing this thing I love and I want to work when, where, and how I like
Mhm.
with clients who I can do my best work for and who really appreciate me and preferably pay me well in the process. But by not recognizing all these extra things that we have to do behind the scenes, we can just end up with absolutely no work life balance.
Mm.
And it, the main reason for that, and the main reason so many freelancers end up with total overwhelm that leads to burnout, which is all too common in the freelance sphere, is because we don't set boundaries. And setting boundaries around our time is such an important thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I've been starting to do it more myself. It's that sort of, I'm a yes to everything type of person. I will say yes to everything. I will accept it. Oh yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I can help with that. And yeah, I probably can help with that. But you try to end up being a superhuman, don't you? You just try and say yes to everything. Um, if you're a senior, I know a lot of people that are senior, they sometimes struggle to delegate because when
Mm,
you've got younger staff, they may not be quite as good as you, but they need to get better somehow. So you have to. It's
yeah.
almost that yeah. What's the film Frozen? Let it go, let it go.
Yes.
It's almost this letting go of things, isn't it?
Mhm.
I've been a senior for a long time, and I had to let my junior members, sometimes they would make mistakes, but that's fine because it's
Mm,
learning and it's part of every day. Even when I worked at big companies like large retail chains, and they would make a mistake on social media, it's fine. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's not be forgotten
it's
tomorrow.
life. They're human.
It's that sort of letting go, and I'm not talking letting go so that the office blows up, but there are ways to let things go, to sort of say no to things, to put things in
Mm.
the bin that you don't need to do. What have you got sort of any sort of techniques or tips for people wanting to do that?
Yeah, I don't know which of the tips to share, I guess. One thing that actually my coach really recently shared with me is, you've probably come across the matrix. I can't remember what it's called, but it'll be like important, urgent, not important, not urgent. That
Yeah.
doesn't work because I do have
Eisenhower.
a neurodivergent brain. That makes it a little bit more fun. So I have do, delegate, delay, or ditch, and those four things. And they, I mean, I think it's my neurodivergent brain really doesn't help me with this, because as soon as a journalist will email me and say, oh, have you got time to answer some questions, and I think, well, this isn't going to be paid, this isn't going to be the best use of my time, I'm not going to be making money for this, but it's exposure, it might help me to support a few more freelancers or people who are running their own business. So I'll have a go, and then I'll think, well, hang on, I'm pausing paid client work. So I think, okay, I can do that. I can delay it, or I can ditch it, or I can ask my VA to do it for me. So it
Yeah.
doesn't always, we don't always have to take everything on. I've struggled with perfectionism my whole life, and I've always found it really difficult to delegate. So for me, I didn't outsource anything for probably the first 15 years of my business. I even struggled with doing my accounts. I hated the thought of having to pay my hard earned cash to someone else. That I
Mm.
really struggled with that. But once I realized that because that is their field of expertise, they can probably do what it's taking me a day to do in a couple of hours. So it's not like I have to pay them a day's work. I just have to pay them for a couple of
Mm.
hours. And I now have a super team of people around me, accountant, IT support. My virtual assistant is off the scale with everything she supports me with. And it's a game changer, because now I can focus my time on doing the parts of my job that I really enjoy, the things that
Mm.
light me up, which are working with other people's words, and kind of, I use this slightly cheesy phrase, but saying, to transform other people's marketing messages from blah blah to ta-da. That's what I love doing the most, and it's got kind of a cheesy, like, yay, it's kind of an exciting dopamine kind of phrase, because that's the work that I love.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it is about recognizing the things that are not your main strength. You don't enjoy them as a result. You're not making money from doing these things. Sometimes you just have to, like, there's an exercise in the book that actually says, go through a typical week. We all know there's no such thing as a typical week, but in an
Mm.
example week, write down all the tasks that you did. And if you need to use a time tracking app such as Toggle Track, to kind of actually just start becoming aware of how you're using your time, and actually highlight the things that you're not good at, you don't enjoy, and they
Mm.
don't make you money, and start thinking about how, get creative. How else can you manage those tasks? Is there a colleague you can outsource them to? Do you need to hire a freelancer to do those tasks for you? And the best thing at the end of the day, this is how my copywriting clients feel when they work with me. Once they've hired me, they know that that part
Mm.
of their working week is the one thing they have to not give any more thought to, because they know it's in safe hands. They don't need to worry about it anymore. And it's not just the time. We underestimate how much freedom comes from having the headspace
Yeah.
to focus on the work that you love and you enjoy and that you do best.
Yeah. It's reducing that mental load, isn't it? It's hugely huge.
And
Many of us, it's not just the mental load we have at work, it's the mental load we have at home. I have an autistic son. I've got to go to a meeting this afternoon, for the school, and so I'm thinking about that all day, and then I've got work, and then I'm going on holiday soon, so I'm thinking about planning for that. It's this constant
it's a
load that
lot.
everyone has in their brain. God, just to pick one thing off and just give it to someone and not have to think about it. That's someone said, like sometimes your brains are like a browser with all the tabs open. And sometimes,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be just nice to close? I think it was Frank, um, in my previous podcast. He said, wouldn't it be nice to just close one of those tabs? Not all of them, just one of them. One less thing to think about. I love that thought.
100%. That's a really great way of describing it as well. Like my favorite meme has, or even before I got my neurodivergence diagnosis, my favorite meme was always "my brain has too many tabs open," because that's just my world. That's my life and my brain. But
Mm.
using the tabs analogy is something that everybody can relate to. At the moment, I have 9 tabs open on this browser, and
Yeah.
then like that's literal tabs. So yeah, so if I could sort of send a couple of those links to my VA and say, can you just sort this for me? Just just do
Yeah.
this thing for me. And it's great because I know I can trust her, and I just don't need to think about it. It's all about the mental load. And the more efficient you can be, the more of those tabs you can close down, the clearer your brain and your field of focus becomes, and the more
Mm.
enjoyment you get out of your working life.
And it's really interesting thinking about, outsourcing things, because I think the one thing when I've worked with a lot of STEM founders is they think they need to employ someone in the business, but actually I found the first step I find much easier is finding freelancers is my first step to outsourcing, because they're not permanent employees. You don't have to deal with tax, national insurance. It's that toe in the water of getting someone on board to dip something up. Because what I found, a lot of people, they're sort of waiting because I want an employee, and I'm like, no, maybe instead have a marketeer for a few hours, or a copywriter for a few hours, someone to do this, a VA
Yeah.
to do that, because you can then spread sort of
Mm,
the load. And even for people that can't afford too many, might be quite new in business, haven't got much money. Sometimes I say, well, just have someone for 2 hours a week, an hour at the beginning, hour and at the end, to just do an
mm,
organization of your list of things you need to do, and then a decompress at the end of the week. Something that's going to help you, that organize the rest of your week. So, whatever you
mm,
can try and outsource, even if it is that thinking piece of, let's just have a call and download this list and work out what we need to do. Because having that outside perspective, a friend of mine, John Asperian, always tells me about this, and you know him as well. He always tells me, you can't read the label from inside the jar. And it's that outside perspective,
yeah.
that gives us this sort of, that we can't do ourselves. We're too inside the jar. Sarah and I just went to Uplift Live with John Asperian, so he's came forefront to mind. Uh, it,
Yeah.
it was fabulous, and every time I see him, this saying pops into my head. You can't read the label from inside the jar. Getting that outside perspective, even for a couple of hours a week, is brilliant. I always recommend mentors as well. If sometimes people can get
Mm,
a free mentor to help do this as well. And
mm,
then, if you can get a mentor, you can use, pay for a few hours of copywriting. Or how, if someone's sort
mm.
of outsourcing copywriting, how much do you recommend? If they're a small 1 or 2 person business, do they need a lot, or do they just need a few hours a week, or how does it generally work?
How long is a
Piece of
piece of
string.
string?
Yeah.
Entirely depends on the business and the capability and the confidence and the competence, I guess, of the person who's running it, in terms of when it comes to language. But I was just going to say that, adding on to what you've just said, one way of working with a freelancer is quite often they will provide packages,
Mm.
time-based packages. So um, in Survival Skills for Freelancers, I talk about like moving away from time-based billing, because you only have a certain number of hours in every day, week,
Mm.
month. You're limiting your earning potential if you're charging on a time basis. So I recommend moving towards value-based pricing. And that's the way that I generally work. If I'm writing a new website, for example, or doing what I call a documagic job on a company's existing website that was originally written by their founder, and now they've got some budget under their belt and they're ready to invest in having a proper website that can sell for them while they sleep. Um, with that kind of project, I'll take a look at the project itself and then provide a fixed fee for
Mm.
completing that project, which really helps with budgeting. But another way that I can do it, and I do for clients, is take businesses on a retainer, and they can have 10 hours of my time for the documagic work every month. And for that, they can either come to me with specific questions and say, look, I'm trying to, it can be bigger picture, more strategic questions about
Mm.
their marketing and their language. And I'm always happy to help with that kind of thing on a time basis. But then also they could say, look, I've written my next 10 LinkedIn posts. Could you take a look at them and fix them? So, you can write the most sketchy of loose drafts. And as long as all the information is there, doesn't matter about the flow or the structure or the repetition or the clarity or the human element, just send the files over to somebody, if you have me on a retainer, send them over. I'll use my hours that month to fix those
Mm.
documents for you. And then you could just forget about it until you get them back. And then they're ready to schedule for the next 6 weeks. And that works with anything: web copy, leaflets. If you're doing, for example, a trade show or an exhibition and you have to come up with some kind of core, like boilerplate copy about your business, something that really summarizes what you do and who you do it for, and the benefits of working for you. Whatever it is you've written, it doesn't have to be complicated. You know kind of how to go, oh, I'm going to get quotes from 3 different copywriters. Just get a copywriter you trust onto a retainer and start firing stuff over to them
Mm.
as and when you need a quick turnaround.
That's a really good idea, because it leaves it really flexible, doesn't it? You don't have to write 4 blogs a month. You can use it really flexibly, and I like that. And I think, the way that sort of company owning life goes, that works really well for them. If someone's not quite ready to sort of outsource work yet, say they're so small they haven't got any budget at all,
Hmm.
how how would you suggest, what do you think they should sort of concentrate on in terms of um maybe making themselves more comfortable with doing the text themselves, almost to get through until they've got to a space where they can spend that little bit out, what can they sort of do to sort of fake it till you make it, maybe? I don't know if it's or fake it till you can make someone else,
Yeah,
get someone else
you
to do it.
believe it is a nice expression, I think, because fake, like nobody likes the word fake, do they?
Yeah.
But we use that expression all the time because it sums it up. But I did hear "be it till you believe it," and I thought that's actually quite nice. Similar sort of thing. So I would say get comfortable with your own voice. It's just like the default when we go into business, that we start feeling as if we need to write in a certain way, in a
Mm.
in a professional tone, and we end up sounding like an apprentice candidate, and they don't sound like real people, do they? They're not
Yeah.
relatable. They're not people that somebody would ever go, oh, do you know what? I really like this about that person, because they're not sharing anything that is remotely human
Mm.
or relatable about themselves. So I would say just get comfortable writing as yourself, and whether that is just challenging yourself to write a social post. It can be personal. I know people still say LinkedIn isn't Facebook, but if
Yeah.
you go back, I mean, this is what one of the speakers at Uplift Live said last week, and I 100% agree with it. If you go back over your past 30 days of posts, or maybe the past year, if you don't post very often, and see which of your posts ranks most highly, which has encouraged the most engagement, which has got the most comments, the most likes, the most shares. And it'll always inevitably be the posts that have a personal aspect to them, the posts that make your reader feel as if they're actually getting to know who you are as a human being and not as a business owner. So practice for 30 days, a little post on LinkedIn every single day. Tag me in, make sure that you connect with me on LinkedIn, so I can be your accountability buddy, and just see how you go and become more and more comfortable with writing as you, not writing in this kind of faceless robot voice that we all feel is expected by others,
Mm.
because nobody likes being on the receiving end of that language. It doesn't mean, it's like we have certain phrases that we churn out for certain inevitabilities. So if something goes wrong, the business, the business language, the robot language is we would like to apologize for any inconvenience caused. You know, what happened to saying, oops, I made a mistake, I'm sorry? And that
Yeah,
might be a step too far for some people, but there's nothing wrong with saying,
yeah,
you know, this is, I got this wrong. It's actually really humanizing and it's really refreshing. I would far rather a business said, we made a mistake, we're really sorry, rather than we would like to apologize for any inconvenience caused. It's the same with sending out a message to a new client you've just started working with. You know, please do not, you know, I have had emails that genuinely use these exact words. Please do not hesitate to contact myself should you require any further information. What's wrong with saying, if you need anything else, get in touch, I'm here to help?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
let me know if you need me, I'm here to help. It's just, it's the difference between dealing with a robot, ChatGPT over here, and dealing with a person,
yeah.
a genuine warm-blooded human.
Do you know,
And
it's
it
so
makes all the difference in business.
it's so funny, because I've worked for big companies and I've worked for small companies. And the big companies, everyone goes, oh, they're just faceless corporate thing. And then I've seen small companies go, I want to sound more like the big companies. And I'm like, no, no, the big companies need to sound more like you. This personal side, this wonderful, warm side. This is why people pick small businesses. I ran a marketing class recently and I asked people who their favorite businesses and brands were. And so many of the course said that it was the small sort of artisan producers. They were like, oh, I just love their posts and I love how they talk and what they stand for. And there wasn't really any big faceless brands in the list. It was all these
Octopus aren't
really
bad.
human ones, which didn't surprise me really.
Mm.
So I think, and I wonder if actually this is where the problem with ChatGPT, because pre ChatGPT, people still tried to sort of speak like this very formal and very corporate language. It was this sort of
Mm.
almost faux business language, wasn't it? This sort of way you spoke.
Yeah.
And
Or
ChatGPT, oh
facade, isn't it?
yeah,
Like a facade.
and I think ChatGPT, it learns from our language. That's where it learned from. And I would say there are more bad copywriters, not copywriters, but people that write copy, than there are good copywriters in the world. So it's almost
Yeah.
learned this sort of weird businessy language that actually is not,
Mm.
because that has overwhelmed the good copy. And so it's gone, well, this is the majority, so this must be right in the era of that sort of language that it's learned. And I feel like it's almost learned this sort of stiff, weird language. And so
Yeah.
and the other stuff, the more human stuff, maybe it hasn't picked that up because, well, firstly, it probably doesn't.
It's the
And
minority.
yeah, it's in the minority, but also, it can't. This is, and I'm writing something at the moment around sort of AI and data, in that, because it's what AI is doing is picking up a lot of our biases and our things, that ways that we do stuff as humans. And maybe in language it's done that as well. It's sort of picked up the bias because it hasn't got the knowledge to differentiate between fact, fiction, good, bad. It just goes on quantity a lot of the time, a bit like you said, sort of average.
Yeah. The average of all the averages. How good can it be?
And it's funny because I know when I saw people going, oh, I can tell this post is ChatGPT, or that LinkedIn headline's ChatGPT, and I'm like, is it though? Because I'm sure I saw those before ChatGPT existed.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're just more aware of it now, I think, which is
I
really
think so.
interesting. So
Mm.
with the sort of STEM founders, I love your ideas of making them become more comfortable themselves. And and it's this human aspect, isn't it, of things. Are there any sort of mistakes that they should avoid, that you see quite often, that you wish that sort of people knew about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's a mistake as in, I'm not talking grammatical mistakes. I think just
Mm,
generally the biggest mistake we all make is and this isn't restricted to STEM founders at all, but
mm,
but people in business in general, make the copy be about them. So, you see those posts and it's like, we are delighted to announce, and it's the same old sort of language that, again, you touched on telling stories, so sort of circling back to that, making it more compelling and more human from that perspective, rather than saying, I have 30 years experience in the STEM space, and I'm highly qualified and I trained under this person, or I have this and this qualifications. Ultimately, the businesses that deal with you, there's something in the human side that they've connected to, not just your business capabilities. So try to make your writing, this is the biggest issue that I come across in websites when I'm working on website refreshes, again, what I
Mm,
call documagic, custom clients who already have a website, the copy's all there, but it's not converting for them. So it's not working. People are reading it, but they're bouncing off the page really quickly. They're not finding anything to kind of grasp onto. And it's because it will say, we do this for our clients. What it needs to do is talk more about you. So you
mm,
being the reader. So it needs to say, we understand the challenges you're facing, and we do this for you. If you're talking about, we do X, Y, Z for our clients, you're creating a physical wall between, because the reader doesn't care, who is this client of which you speak? They're not
yeah.
identifying as being a client because they're not a client. So at that point, the only way you can make a direct connection is to break down that wall and express what you're saying, but say you. So the person at the, like, always picture Shirley Polikoff, who was this ad woman, really famous ad woman in the 60s in the States. She wrote the is she or isn't she, the Clairol hairspray ad. I think it was Clairol. And she said copy is a conversation with the consumer. And that's
Yeah.
what you've got. It's got to be one-to-one communication. So one-to-one conversation. So instead of thinking of your audience as this mass of tens of thousands of potential customers, you have to get super clear on who your individual customer is. What are, circling back to what I said earlier on about, what are the things that stress them out? What are their biggest time constraints? What are the things that keep them awake at night? What are the biggest worries? And to know really clearly how you solve those problems, how you make their life better or easier, or just more enjoyable. So get really clear on who that customer avatar, I know it's jargon, but
Mm,
customer profile, get really clear on who that individual is, and then picture them in every single thing you write. I do webinars sometimes about human language, and I have a slide and I say, this is Bob. So in my mind, my target client is Bob. And everything I write is me having an actual human interaction with him. And I'm thinking about, what does that word actually mean to him? Like,
mm,
what does it mean if I say this? What does this phrase mean? Is this something he's heard before? Or is this going to make him sit and listen and actually think, oh, do you know what? These words really relate to me, and they
mm,
spark an emotion in me, and they spark a feeling that I want to take action as a result of reading what I've read. So whether that's a LinkedIn post, an email campaign, a web page, whatever it is, your idea, your aim, your goal with everything you write is to encourage your reader to take action of some sort. Even
brilliant.
if that action is just, okay, now I think about this thing differently because these words have changed my mind on this issue.
Brilliant. I love that. And it just resonates so much because when I'm reading copy, that's what it. Oh, this is about me. Oh, I can picture myself doing this because it talks directly to me. It's that putting that picture in your mind's eye. You can imagine yourself enjoying these benefits and engaging in it. So I absolutely love that. I feel like I'm going to let you off the hook now, Sarah, because of your sore voice. And I've made you talk for 45 minutes. So
That's quite
I think that was absolutely brilliant advice. I'm sure the audience will absolutely love it. But I'm going to just ask you for one more thing, which is let everyone know where they can find you so they can seek you out.
okay. So, if you want to know more about what I do and my services and my books, then I would say go to sarahtownsededitorial.co.uk. Everything is there. If you want to connect with me on social media, look me up on LinkedIn. And if you say that you've listened to Anna's podcast, I always love to know where people have come from, and I'll be more than happy to accept your connection request and to keep an
Fantastic.
eye on your copy in the future.
Fantastic, brilliant, and yeah, Sarah, have a look at her books because they are fantastic, and particularly, I'm just rereading the Survival Skills for Freelancers again because I read it when I started my business about 3 years ago, and I feel like I need a refresher now because you forget what you learned, don't you? And you sort of get into a bit of a habit of doing the same thing over and again. So I'm going back for
Absolutely.
a second read through it.
Have you got the 2025 edition?
No, I haven't. Oh, yeah,
Oh, you
I'm
need the new
behind the
one.
times. I need to get the new one, don't I?
It came out in January, so it's up to date, really up to date. And there's
Right.
more value than ever in there.
That's all right. I'll be
And
straight.
all the books are available on Amazon, or you can buy directly from me if you are a avoider.
I know there's been a few boycotts at the moment, haven't there? So
Yeah.
I must admit, I do buy on Amazon, and just because it is one click and it's really easy. So sorry, boycotters, but I do understand why. So it's fantastic. Thank you so much for being on, and I will put some links in the show notes to your website and LinkedIn as well, so people can find them easier. And yeah, thank you for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening.
Always an absolute pleasure to talk to you.